to answer that question, we reviewed generally the literature on why people would be susceptible to mis and disinformation. And so there are a couple of reasons for that. So people tend to believe information that corresponds to existing beliefs, and the internet really allows people to avoid information that challenges their priors because they engage with information very selectively. We also know that even in the absence of people curating their media environment, algorithms do that for us. So algorithms that are employed by Facebook prioritize content that mirrors implicit existing user preferences to maximize time spent on the platform. And we now know some of that, some of this information obviously came to the light recently when the Facebook whistleblower made all this public, but we know that angry and polarizing posts generate user engagement, and so the algorithm really prioritizes those. Another reason is that people want simple answers. We are cognitive misers. We do not like to expend much cognitive resources. And so we use intuition and not necessarily sophisticated reasoning to evaluate information. We also know from research that repetition of information causes us to believe it. So repetition increases belief in misinformation. And if we are familiar with the source, we also are more susceptible to the information. So we tend to believe information that our friends convey to us. We also know, and this is research from authors who have also participated in the series and whose chapter will be appearing in the book, we also know that repeated exposure to hateful speech has behavioral consequences. So it changes the normative response to hate and allows for outgroup derogation. And so the repeated exposure, likely from friends on Facebook, right? When things go viral on Facebook, we see it all the time. Usually we see it posted by friends. And so all of this kind of heightens our susceptibility to false information. But then also, as we are exposed to hateful messages more often, it sort of lowers our inhibition and we're more likely to tolerate or to engage in offline violence. So this leads us to the research question. So based on all the literature that I just reviewed, we really wanted to understand how the people in Myanmar themselves, how they viewed Facebook as a source of news, whether they encountered hate speech or misinformation, and if so, what actions they took and what initiatives they would like to see to address the issue of misinformation and hate online. And so with this, I'm going to unshare and I'll pass the mic to my colleague, Myat.
Thank you very much, Mona. So as Mona mentioned, we have this research, and then like in order to address these research questions, Mona just presented, we did this research. We mainly use the qualitative research methods, and we use mainly two qualitative data collection methods. One is individual in-depth interviews, and another one is focus group discussions, FGDs. So we did 22 in-depth interviews and then 4 FGDs. So we did the data collection was carried out by the 2 Myanmar-born researchers, including me, and another person is the Professor Ardeth that I show the picture here, right here with the background is a very beautiful Myanmar flags, and so we both have a strong research experiences and and also research network across Myanmar. So we did the data collections in 3 regions and 3 states of Myanmar. So in the context of Myanmar, we can say that the regions and states are like politically like the same, but if we consider like ethnic in terms of like ethnic composition and in a way of like ethnic politics, like is we have a huge difference between like regions and states. So basically regions hosted the majority like Burma population, like the regions like Yangon and Mandalay, and then Zakine is sort of like mixed like ethnic composition. And then we have this like states like Cayenne, Mon, and Kachin. These are the like hosted the mostly minorities, like but like different minorities. For instance, like Cayenne state is mainly populated by Karen, and even in terms of like only one Karen states, like we have a different like Karen like ethnic the tribes. So uh so we did this research in these like ethnically different areas in 2019 from May to July, like 3 months. And how do we recruit respondent? As our research is the like qualitative oriented research, we don't do like random selection, but our research cover like a wide range of like respondents. So we have a diverse, like a respondents groups, in terms like a demographically diverse, geographically diverse. So as Mona also mentioned, the Myanmar is like one of the most ethnically and linguistically diverse countries on earth. We are very much careful in selections of like different like ethnic groups. So we have like 135 ethnic groups, minorities, and we also have a 300 like a different linguistic groups. So we cover like most of the major ethnic groups in our research, and like including like a Myanmar, Mon, Karen, like Kachin, and some like the minorities like Lisus or something like that. And in terms of age groups, we mostly cover the young like Facebook users age between like 18 to 25. But if you look at like the age range, we cover like the age between like 18 and 45. And in terms of gender diversity, we have a fair representation like of these groups, like men, women, and the other gender. And we also cover the different religious like groups. We have a Buddhists, we have like Christians, and some Muslims. So in terms of economic status, we have a different level of like we have a different like income level, and we also cover urban and rural populations. And also another important point here is that we targeted like mainly two groups, the Facebook users and non-users. And of course, like Facebook users are quite easy for us to approach and to identify, but for non-user, like it is quite difficult for us to recruit. So sometimes we have to use some of these like anthropologic methods. So we just observe the village, and then we approach to some of these like women groups, like you see in the photos, like women like the like household women working, and then we just like politely approach and then like ask, oh, you all are like Facebook user, are you all enjoy Facebook, using Facebook? And then they said, oh, we all are the Facebook user, but like this lady is not, because her husband like doesn't allow her use, something like that. And then we can identify the non-user. So this sort of things we have to be like to be clever in a way of like selecting the non-users. So this is how we cope with. And in terms of data documentation, we didn't do the voice recording mainly for the security reason, and we just actually want to give our respondents the feeling of security, safety, because as like also Mona also explained in the background, we are the very conflict prone country, and then we are living with like this conflict for like over half a decade, you know. I mean, half a century. I mean, so is, you know, we have this sort of like trust deficit, and then you don't really want like someone who you don't really know to take your voice record. And then like if you just like once like open the tape recorder or something, and then you just feel like afraid, like and then you just keep like talk less, you know. So this is the way like we have been facing. So we don't really when we like do the research in the context of Myanmar, we normally don't take the voice recording, but we just do the written down like the notes, you know. And then after that we translated like all these interview notes from Myanmar to English. So okay, this is all from me. Thank you.
Just gonna start sharing my screen. Bear with me for a minute. Okay. So based on the research on the people that Myat and Ardeth spoke with, we were able to gather some information. And I want to preface this by saying that this is just based on the people that we spoke with. So we can't definitively say that what we're finding here is true for everyone in Myanmar. But given the gathering of the sample, as Myat explained it, we think it's a pretty good approximation of where a variety of people are coming from. So I think one of the most important findings, when something that is important for us to realize in putting the concerns about Facebook and repression of the Rohingya into context, is that, and the spreading of hate speech on Facebook, is that Facebook is a primary source for news for the people of Myanmar. This is especially the case for people who still believe that traditional media and broadcast media were being censored by the government. And one thing that people mentioned repeatedly is that they like Facebook because it allows people to hear directly from other people, and because it counters the narrative put forth by the government and the military. And you can see here, as one man put it, and by the way, we do provide the information that people used to identify themselves, because you'll get different responses from people depending on the ethnic group that they're from and the religion that they practice. So this man identified as being Bamar and Buddhist. Bamar, again, is the majority of the population. And what he said was that you don't get information about conflicts in minority ethnic areas from the government news, but you do get information from these areas on Facebook.
Jenifer, we can't see your screen. We just see the findings slide.
Oh, goodness. Okay. I'm not sure what's going on there. Let me see if I can. Let me stop this share and start a different one. Okay. Okay, you're still seeing just the findings slide, or are you seeing the screen?
I'm seeing
now?
yeah, we're seeing the findings slide.
Still, okay. I think I have to share a different one. I'm sorry. How about now?
That's good. Yeah.
Thank goodness. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so as I said, Facebook is considered a primary source for news in Myanmar, and this is especially true in conflict regions. As this man put it, he said, government news talks for itself, but Facebook talks for the people because people can hear what's happening from people directly. And this is especially the case in Rakhine State, which is where much of the it's where most of the Rohingya tend to live and where they've been pushed out and repressed terribly. I think it's also important to note that since the coup, basically all of Myanmar is a conflict zone. And even though the government banned Facebook, people have still been able to access Facebook using virtual private networks. And so that's been a very important source of information since the coup. But now, just last month, the military has banned virtual private networks, and security forces are enforcing this by stopping people on the street and checking their phones to see if they have VPN software. And if they do have VPN software, they are subject to fines. I think it's $250, which may not sound a lot to us, but certainly is a substantial amount of money for people in Myanmar. And more importantly, they could be imprisoned for, I believe it's up to 3 years. So that is considered one of the most effective ways that any government has attempted to basically ban virtual private networks. Sorry. So another interesting finding that we had was that a lot of people don't trust international media because they believe that the international media's coverage is biased because it really contradicts what they believed. And again, this is in 2019 that these interviews were conducted. At that time, people thought that the international media was very biased in their coverage of the Rohingya crisis. And that's really interesting because prior to the opening of the somewhat opening of the media system, the only source of news that people tended to trust, and the only source that wasn't directly controlled by the government, was the international news broadcasts from the BBC, Voice of America, and some others. But these were broadcast illegally. It was illegal for people to access them, but they did. They were broadcast from outside of the country into Myanmar. And that was an important source of news for a lot of people about what was going on in the rest of the world. And yet they now don't, at least in 2019, did not trust international media, largely because they thought, as this woman put it, that the international news were being very critical of Myanmar and the new civilian government, and they were just taking the side of the Rohingya. So it's interesting also to note that people do see posts that challenge their views. So it's not that they don't have exposure to international media through Facebook and people whose views might contradict their own from human rights organizations and that sort of thing, but they are more drawn to congruent information. And a couple comments that people made that we've included here are that, they confirm my views because I only share or read the works of like-minded people. If people say something that's rude or untruthful, I'll just block them. And then this other man who acknowledged that we can see different views of different people, but I don't want to read every comment. It's normal for people to have different views. So that I think is interesting. We did find that people in Myanmar, at least the ones we spoke with, were very well aware that Facebook could be used and was being used to spread hate. As one man put it, when I read hate messages or biased news about Muslims and the Rohingya, I feel sorry. Sometimes I feel really insecure staying in this country. We also found that people acknowledged that at least some people, they thought maybe other people, were drawn to the hate speech on Facebook, that they knew it was bad, they knew it was hateful, but they liked it. We actually had this man who was talking about, it's not that people don't know it's wrong, it's just that they like it. He equated Facebook usage and being drawn to hate speech as similar to the way that alcoholics are drawn to alcohol. They know it's bad for them, but they can't really resist it. We did find that people are limited in their ability to fact check. Most of them said they use their instincts to discern what's correct and what's incorrect. And this person and other people also said that they tended to trust government official pages and spokespersons of political parties, especially if it was a party that they were in agreement with. It's important to note that there are some efforts to counter hate speech on Facebook. As this man put it, there have been some civil service organizations that have taken action, and I think that's an important thing to note. So it's not, Facebook is never all bad or all good. It's really a tool that people use, and so people have tried to use Facebook as a mechanism for actually countering hate speech. And so that's something that I think we often lose sight of. And so what are the lessons that we can take away from Myanmar? Admittedly, this information came out, these interviews were conducted before the coup, but I think that there's relevant information for the introduction of social media platforms in other non-democratic settings and authoritarian regimes. And basically, I don't have a lot here, but these are the things that we think our findings point to as possibly being effective. So civil service organizations are probably going to be an effective means for countering hate speech online. These are homegrown methods of countering hate speech, not so much human rights organizations sending out information or international media providing information about genocide against the Rohingya. That's really not necessarily going to be effective because there's a lack of trust in those organizations, or at least there was in 2019. Digital literacy campaigns would probably be an effective means. So that's something that could be done. I think it's super important, especially in a country like Myanmar, where there is so much ethnic linguistic variation, that there be native language speakers reviewing the content. It really, there are small differences in a lot of these languages. So not just Bamar, not just Burmese, but some of the other languages, that might be a more effective way to monitor Facebook. And finally, I think it's a long shot, but certainly if Facebook and other social media platforms could be pressured to move away or alter algorithms so that they're not always prioritizing inflammatory content, that might be a potential way to mitigate the spread of hate speech on Facebook and other social media. And that's it. Look forward to some questions and feedback. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And let's open it up to some questions. I believe we have the first one here in the chat box by Lisa Bruton. What kind of awareness did you find amongst participants of the CSOs and digital literacy efforts already underway? So I'm having a little bit of sorry, did you hear that?
Yeah,
question?
Myat, did you want to address that since you spoke directly with some of these people?
Okay. What kind of awareness did you find among participants of the CSO and digital literacy efforts already underway? Okay. So it's sort of like we can actually like have to say that we have some like CSO groups. We see that like they have been working for the digital rights and the like the freedom of expressions. That sorts of groups are also like when we collected the like when we did the interviews at that time, like it's like growing. It's like they are emerging, you know. So they became active, and also they have been engaging with like a Facebook, and also just, you know, like you know, pointing out some of the weak point of the Facebook, you know, and also trying to like to influence in in a way of like a Facebook policy makings, particularly for Myanmar. So this sort of like groups exist, but most of these like civil society groups, they are more actually you know, see the values of the Facebook, you know, like giving the chance of the civil society groups like to voice up, you know, on the platform, you know. So because before like we have this like long-term like authoritarianism, and then we don't have any like a chance to speak up, you know. But now we have the Facebook, and then almost all civil society groups, even like a community-based organizations, we call them the CBOs, they have their own Facebook page, and then they can actually talk. So some of these civil society groups are, as we know, that they are like, they know the liberal values, and then they are actually more like standing with the pro-democracy side. And then some of them also understand the complexity of the Rohingya issues, but most of them, some of a bunch of them also exist as the illiberal, you know, civil society, you know, like, so it's actually like a, you know, so it's kind of like varies, like, and then like some of these like illiberal civil society, they actually are part of the, you know, like the propaganda, the governments, the military propaganda machines, and you know that they discriminate the Rohingyas and other minorities. And they also promote a lot of like a nationalistic sentiments. It's also the same things happening right now.
I see Laura has a question. Yeah. She's asking, were you able to share your findings with Facebook? And if so, what was their response? We did not, right, Jenifer? I mean, we at some point talked to somebody, but no, we did not share our findings with Facebook.
No, yeah, I mean, we did talk to Facebook a couple times. We didn't, you know, it's always, we didn't want to be too close to Facebook. We're not doing research for Facebook. And so I think it's important to keep that separation. One of our papers on this similar paper has been published already. And I actually have an acquaintance who works for Facebook, and he reached out to me. And so there's been some informal discussion, but nothing beyond that. But they certainly have the information.
So there's also a question from Durga, who is saying that since this research is prior to the coup, to what extent do you think the findings are relevant, particularly in the erratic political landscape where the line between hate speech and freedom of expression has been blurred? So maybe Jenifer can take that question. And then he's also asking, or they are also asking, pardon me for making assumptions about gender. Majority of your quotation represents male and Bamar. Are there any nuanced understanding among other gender, ethnic, and religious groups? So I just want to say to that second part of the question that, of course, Jenifer, you know, picked a couple of quotations for the presentation. And if you actually look at the chapter, we even interviewed Rohingya who had left the country. And so we do have a much broader range of, you know, quotes in the paper. So it's much richer. So we weren't really able to do justice to the richness of the responses and the different quotes and perspectives that we have. But Jenifer, can you respond to that first part maybe?
Yeah, I think it is important, even though it took place prior to the coup, because we're not just looking for answers about Myanmar, right? We're looking for lessons that we can learn from what happened in Myanmar, because what happened in Myanmar and the way Facebook was used to spread hate speech, that's been acknowledged by many parties. That's not anything new. What we're not really even investigating that, because the UN's team basically found that to be the case, and others have written about that. And I think that work is definitely important. But what our contribution is really what it's like for people on the ground when they go from nothing to all of a sudden having access to all this information through digital media. In this case, in Myanmar, it was primarily Facebook. But I think that this is part of this is just one part of the puzzle, and the book is covering much more comprehensively the spreading of hate speech in digital media. So I think that this is an important chapter, and learning from what happened in Myanmar can maybe give us insights about what could potentially happen if social media, whatever the platform is, are introduced to other settings that have not been previously exposed to that much social media or the internet. So I do think that is important. So I'm going to go on. I see we have, yeah, it's true. The majority of the quotes I chose, I was working fast, and they did tend to be by men who were Bomber. But let's be fair, most of the people in Myanmar are Bombers, so those comments are important. But it's also, Myat and Ardeth did some great work identifying people who represent other groups in Myanmar, and those are included in the chapter. So there's a question about whether there's a generational gap regarding the use of Facebook in the country. I think this would be a good thing for you to respond to, Myat, because you've done some additional work on Myanmar and Facebook that I think you could even bring into this conversation.
Okay, Jenifer, thank you. I mean, I can say that, like, we can definitely say that we have the generational gap in between, like, the Facebook users, and then I can also say that the older generations, they are actually more like susceptible to the Facebook, and also they don't really have this like digital like a literacy, so they are actually tend more to accept whatever things they see on the Facebook, and but now like when they are like we have been seeing these like trend that more people like even the older generations, they knows the weak point of the Facebook, because like after they buzzing through the Facebook and like several years like using Facebook, and then they also learn like some experiences from Facebook. But still like if you have if you face with a certain like issue, like a certain like conflict that is so huge, and then that actually like separate like groups, and then they are in one groups, and then like they actually like the people just stand for like whatever the things right for their own groups, so this is the tendency that we have been seeing. And the younger generations right now is mostly the generation Z. They are actually more with the technology, and they understand more like how to like use like the Facebook like best in a term of like in a negative ways and also the positive ways. They can also actually like make some of these photoshops, and then like also cross like a platform like networkings and all sort of like a technology like driven users characteristics. They have it, and so this is also one thing is good. One like the young generation Facebook users group who are actually like working for the digital rights, and also the like a checking, groups, and then they actually also like give some informations to the some of the like users, and then like they also teach like what is the like the fake news, how like we can differentiate between fake news and then like good news, this sort of things, So this is the things, yeah, what we have been seeing now, yeah.
So I see there's one more question, and that now another one. The question is, I was wondering what you could also share about the motivations behind the use of Facebook to disseminate harmful content in the context of the coup and civil resistance online. That's not what we were working on in this chapter, because the research took place prior to that. But I think we can talk about that a little bit. And I would encourage other people here, like Lisa, if you want to chime in here at all, feel free, because you're certainly also an expert, maybe even more of an expert on how Facebook sort of became a tea room, if you will, in Myanmar. I mean, I think the motivations behind using Facebook to disseminate harmful content in both against the Rohingya and in the context of the coup and civil resistance is because it's effective. Most of the people, so many people are on Facebook in Myanmar. It's an effective way to reach people and reach them quickly, and you don't have to deal with any kind of filter that you would have to deal with, any gatekeeping role of traditional media, especially since traditional media are pretty much government controlled. Even if people don't perceive them to be government controlled, although I think most people do, even though they don't perceive them to be that way, Facebook is a much freer kind of Wild West, if you will, format for people to use to get their message out. And everyone always wants to control the message whenever there's a conflict situation. And Facebook is a very easy way to do that in Myanmar. It's very accessible, or at least it has been. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one?
I think I can also add a little bit, So currently, like most of you actually notice that what's happening right now in Myanmar, like after the coup, and then like you definitely see like we have this whole bunch of like populations have been resisting, and then they have been using the Facebook for their like the anti coup and then like a democratic like fight for. But you again, like even though like your purpose is for the like a democratic fight and then anti-coup resistance, but you use this hate speech method, and then you use Facebook, you operationalize these hate mechanism, hate mission like through Facebook, so it is like a war, like currently I have been like doing this research between seeing the two groups characteristics, like having like a war, like a destructive wars. So they have been trying to, like, one group is resisting the coup, the very lawless military junta, and then another group is the pro-military groups, so they have been using the Facebook and attack each other, and then they just try to destroy each other at most level. So it is like a war, so even though you are using for the democratic or a future democratic state building, to topple this very a lawless merciless regime, but you still use this hate methods and at a extreme level. So this is, we can say that. So it's our research is also still relevant, the findings still relevant in this current context actually.
I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything about that. Okay.
Well, you guys already made clear how Facebook is kind of the internet in Myanmar. I mean, that's a pretty obvious place where it's almost like it's very difficult to publicize anything without using Facebook. So It seems like the obvious platform, right? Yeah, and a lot of people did go to Twitter after the coup, but Twitter's a very different space. It doesn't offer anywhere near the kind of flexibility in messaging and so on. And you can't silo as well. So Facebook seems like obvious in some ways, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So there's been a lot. Here's another question. There's been a lot that's also written on how the trends on Facebook have been reproduced on TikTok, especially after the coup. Any additional observations on chat apps like Telegram or other private channels? And also, maybe to end on a positive note, any channels other than fact checkers, platforms, or accounts that you would say are trying to advocate for less violence? I'd love to end on a positive note, but I haven't seen much in the way of people trying to advocate for less violence. I mean, also right now things are so different. Anyone want to address the first part of that question about trends on Facebook being reproduced?
Myat,
I
can you?
say
Yeah.
a little bit. Yes, you are right. That is now is we have been seeing a lot of like a cross-platform like a methods, and actually like even like it is even more powerful in destructiveness actually, because they are very like especially the young people, the tech like expert, they are very like good at like using this cross-platform methods. So TikTok is of course like very effective in making videos in a very persuasive ways, and also it's also persuasive to the different groups, and even the the some of these like military. It is because of its TikTok popularity like in the country, the some of these like even the military personnel use it as as their propaganda. I mean, like hate propaganda, and they just actually threat propaganda and hate propaganda. And so they just like create some of the videos of like threatening like with the guns, and then they said, okay, you guys are the anti-coup groups, like I'm going to shoot you everyone, things like that. And then that videos is actually posted on the Facebook, and then also and then another like the popular platform right now is the Telegram. So it's like across the platform, like that kind of hate and then threat, like I mean, like videos and then audios spreading, So, I mean, because of this, like, and because of this, like current conflict, Facebook is actually, we can say that one of the in terms of Myanmar, like the context, like the case, the Facebook, we can say that one of the most, I mean, responsible platform. I mean, like taking the responsibility and also taking the actions. But like the user, this is also the one reason that user also use the other platform like that have a less restricted, less like action against the hate and then threat, like the content. So this is actually happening. So some of these like the civil society groups, they actually like a contact with this platform, but they don't actually have any like reasonable like response from them. So like still like Telegram is very popular, and then these like both groups are using the Telegram a lot for their like for their mission accomplished. I mean, the mission is to destroy each other at most.
So there's one more question, and I'm not sure if we can really answer it, but it's the question is, do we notice any continuation of the trend post-coup in Myanmar to what we noticed prior to the coup, which is how nationalist movements and the Tatmadaw and EAOs took advantage of Facebook? Okay, so we know that that happened before. I mean, I think there's definitely been a struggle for control. I think there has been still some hate speech spread on Facebook, but I don't know if you can address that, Myat, if anybody's really been paying attention to that post-coup or not.
Yes, I can say that like the ultra-nationalist movements groups, and then current like the pro-coup, the current like a military hunters, and it's like a propaganda, like the groups are now like goes hand in hand. So they have been like so doing some of these like the virtual like a propaganda mechanism, and also the on ground like the military operations. So we definitely see that the virtual war, like what's happening on the Facebook or other like social media platforms, is also really like have a definitive like a linkage with like what's happening, the killings each other on the ground. Like, and one interesting thing is that we have been seeing like this sort of formation of very like you know the like the nationalist group, which is even more like a driven with the political purpose, and also the purpose of like the military has been like thriving. That groups called like a Pusoti, so which is like which is backed up by the military, and in like after like 3 months or 4 months after the coup, and then like they train by the military. They are actually the civilians, you know, so they are trained by the militaries, and they are also weaponized by the military. And also they have this sort of like the virtual like propaganda missions on the Facebook, you know. So this is like what the civil, so some of these like the anti-coup groups, and then the civil society, the digital rights like community said is that, you know, this is the military's tactics of like attack from within, like within the civilian, within the community. So the community themselves attack each other, and then like they are just, you know, like wipe up each other. And then this is the way how the military actually like achieve its goal of cracking down like the exterminate the anti-coup groups, anti-coup and the democratic groups.
I just want to make one more point, kind of building off of what Myat has been saying has been happening in Myanmar, and the latest news about the banning of virtual private networks. I think one of the most important things to watch for in Myanmar, and one of the takeaways that we don't know the answer yet, but this is, I think, something to watch for, is right now with the banning of the virtual private networks, the military is seeking to, if you will, close Pandora's box, right? They allowed people to have access to the internet. They opened that door. And one question that I don't think we haven't been able to see any government, at least not as far as I can see, be able to completely close the lid on Pandora's box. And it'll be interesting to see if the military will be able to do that with this ban on virtual private networks. I know that's a little far away from the digital media and hate speech question, but as far as the controlling the message question, that will be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I think there's also been some evidence that the new military government is negotiating with China to buy some of their technical tools to have just a very restricted version of the internet.
Yes, the military has been actually using all around of this like a digital operation methods. I mean, they also have like in terms of like infrastructure, like capacity, the military have more options. Like Jenifer said, the VPNs like closing, and then also they also increase the price of the internet, and also as Mona explained that like they also use the China support in a technology to create the firewall, and also to create some of these like a white list. And then they actually close down, like not only the Facebook and other social media itself are actually banned. We cannot use like if either like if one like have access to the VPN, we cannot actually access to social media and even Wikipedias, and also like several like university websites are also not on the white list. So it's like all around like like a methods, digital operation methods, some are the censorship methods, some are the surveillance methods. So they have been like and some are the propaganda methods, and these are also linkaged with the on ground like their operations.